Hi, my name is Neil Joshimpule, and I'm bringing you this presentation on how to use XML in SQL Server 2008. This will go through both parsing XML and creating XML output. So this is how the lecture is going to be laid out. First, we'll start it with what is XML. Then it'll be followed by a section on why to use XML with MSSQL or t-sql. Then I'll go into parsing XML in MSSQL, creating XML output in MSSQL, and creating nested XML tags in MSSQL. This will be both theoretical and practical. So I will actually walk you through creating it in SQL Server. Okay, so first, what is XML? XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. It's basically a markup language with tags like HTML. It was designed to carry data, not display it. So basically, it's a way to format data that you're transmitting or passing to a receiver. XML tags are not predefined. You must define your own tags. So that's the difference between XML and HTML. And XML is designed to be self-descriptive. This definition was taken from w3schools.com. Basically, I'll show you an example of XML right now. So, this is the format of XML. A lot of times, you could choose the name of your tag. So every tag, open tag, has a closing tag. You can have nested tags. You can have non-nested tags. You have a root tag. Basically, you can define the structure of the message you're passing by just using opening and closing tags. You can nest them as much as you want. This is basically XML. It's a way to, and each of the tags could have elements. So you can say n1's equal to pi. This is basically XML, although this part is not that important for our case, the examples I'm going to show you. However, XML is actually a dynamic definition language, and remember, it's used to pass information. It's basically a way to format data in a descriptive way. So now let's continue with the slides. So why use it in SQL? Here are a few reasons why you might want to use XML in with the SQL Server. You can have dynamic stored procedure inputs. Since this is a way to define data, you can have one XML input field in SQL Server for your stored proc, and you could have as much data and as many inputs, whether it's a list form or different tag names. You basically could define what you're passing in to your stored proc ahead of time and parse it in there. So that'll allow one stored proc to be easily used for more than one purpose. You can also use XML to exchange information between front-end and back-end systems. Since XML is more structured, and you could just and it's just the data. So by passing only XML between front-end and back-end systems, you can reduce network traffic and only load the page data that changes rather than the entire page. And for any reason you want. There are many reasons why people use XML, and they're all listed on the internet. So if you want, you can just Google it. Okay, so now I'm going to show you an example of parsing XML. I'm assuming you know SQL. Over here, I'm declaring variables. I'm declaring temporary variables. So I'm declaring variables. So here is XML variable. here's a tab1 variable, a tab2 variable, and a tab3 variable. As you can see, I set the XML variable to XML input I made. It has a root tag of root. The first tag 1 is anger, tag 2 has the value of rage, and tag 3 has hatred in it. Angry words, right? But I was reading a book, so I got that out of the book. It was just about this character I was reading about. So basically, I have these tags, and I want to get these values from these tags using SQL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to parse the SQL using a select statement. So select from my XML variable .nodes, and I'm going to go up one level to its root node. So I'm going to root, and I'm going to call this root node XML table, and everything else after that will be, every subtag after that will be XML row. So in order to access those these values, I had to go XML table.xml row.value, and then I'm going to say what particular row I'm looking at from this. So tag 1 is one row, tag 2 would be another row, whoops, and tag 3 would be third row, another row. So I'm going to say tag 1, the first element, and it's a varchar of 100 as tag 1, so it'll be in tag 1 column, this value. XML table.xml row.value of tag 2 of 1 varchar as tag 2, and XML table.xml row.value of tag 3 of 1 of varchar of 100 as tag 3. So let's see that in action. What would actually happen if we ran this? I've already written out the example right here, so I'm going to execute it, and as you can see, it's listed the values of each of these rows under the same under different columns. So in that way, in that manner, I could actually access these values. As you can see, if I have a double tag of the same name, it's not going to be accessed. However, if I was to do this, what would happen? It would go to the second element. By manipulating this statement, you can parse XML in different ways. Basically, you could parse any XML statement that is passed in to your SQL Server instance. Next, I'm going to create an XML output using SQL Server. As you can see, I would just do a normal query, but at the end of the query I would use for XML raw, comma elements, comma root, and the name of the root element or tag I want displayed. So let's look at a sample output of that. I'm going to execute this, and here I have my XML output from that select query I just showed you. As you can see, I defined table as a root element. Table. Each row is separated by a row tag in my table, and each column from that table is listed with its value within the tags. So I have title, SQL dev, title, details, so details. Let me show you the actual data without using it, without it being as XML. So as you can see, this is the normal query of that table, and when I defined it with the element root, it came out like this. So it's basically the table output in XML format. And last but not least, nested XML tags. When nesting XML tags, you could simply use for XML path and the name of the nested elements rows you want within that particular element. You could say elements and type, and then on the outside you would have any non-nested elements from your table, and you would just use the same for XML raw comma elements comma root of the root name, just like before, except with the nested elements you have to use for XML path and elements and type. And let me show you an example of that. So as you can see here, we have a table for each row, which is my root element. For each row that is returned, I have a nested element which is called data. As we can see here, this is data. Outside of that, we have job ID, right? Which is over here, and that's all in a row. And then we have another row with the nested element data, and it has all the data again from that particular element. And then I have the row ID once again. And then I did the same thing here. So in this way I could actually get and nest elements for a particular row. I could even use for XML output, I could even use correlated subqueries in here. In this case, since I just used a select statement, it's referring to the same row that I'm getting the data from. But and in this way it gives me what I want. But you can manipulate this in different ways and have your XML output displayed in basically any way you want. You have the freedom. Microsoft SQL Server allows for something a lot of other database systems don't allow, with this XML output being built in. So that is basically how you deal with XML outputs, inputs, and manipulating XML in SQL Server 2008. I hope you enjoyed this and learned something from this short lecture. And please feel free to ask any questions.